Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Sean Zervis, the Director of BIM Development here at CTC Software, and today, this Wednesday, we're going to be continuing the ROI Calculator series, talking specifically about how to deal with room occupancies or space occupancies for those of you in the MEP environment, and also talking about some building code validation. As always, of course, our webinars are recorded. So those of you who are catching this on the YouTubes, we appreciate you and we hope that we earn your like and subscribe today. But those of you participating with us live in this webinar, you, of course, have the added advantage of being able to ask questions about the workflows while we're in the webinar. So we encourage you to leverage that questions window. Without further ado, we're going to jump in and take a look at this topic for today. Now, in previous webinars and for this whole series, we've been discussing and talking about a tool on our website that helps you discover areas in your workflows where you can automate things, specifically leveraging some of CTC's tools from our suites. And the whole goal is to show you where you can gain easy returns on your investment by using these tools. So in today's webinar, we're going to dig deep into a topic that every one of us, designers, architects, MEP engineers, we all have to work with. And that process is effectively the process of generating and calculating room occupancies that comply with building codes, and then we can use those for subsequent calculations for plumbing fixture calcs or internal airflow calcs, or you name it. Today's example is about plumbing fixture calculations specifically, making sure we're complying with code for that. This process is very manual, and it has the potential for a lot of errors. The whole goal here is that we can save time not having to do that workflow by hand, not diverting our time and our attention from the actual design process, but just having it done automatically. And so the tools that we're going to talk about today, they really help you do this truly automatically how you want to do it. I'm going to show you start to finish how you can pretty much set this up. First, though, we're going to talk about a couple of things. I want to identify exactly the issue and why we care. I want to talk about the steps that we're going to use for this workflow and also the steps that we typically would do manually. Then I'm going to demonstrate the workflow live in less than a minute, pretty much. I'm going to show exactly how this works. And then I'm going to show exactly how you can set this up so you have some next steps for yourself so you can implement this in your practice at your firms the way you need to. First off, let's identify this particular issue. What's going on here? So I'm going to talk today about plumbing fixture calculations, a little bit about egress pathing, a little bit about, general occupancy for the purpose of things like ASHRAE Table 62.1 calculations, you name it. A lot of these things are based on the occupancy in the building. Heck, we have a building so we can occupy it, right? And we have systems and services and things because we've got people in a space and there's codes that surround that. And so the whole reason why we're doing these occupancies isn't because it's fun, it's because we have a reason, there's people that we're trying to keep safe and keep happy in these spaces, get them out of the building in the case of an emergency. And all of this is based on either room calculations or space calculations. Today I'm talking about room calculations. They're basically the same object. But room occupancy calculations are typically based on the area of the room, the actual square footage or square meters in a space, and the usage of that space. And there's some different rules around how we're going to calculate this, but those are the two primary pieces of criteria. What is the actual square footage or the area that we're trying to occupy, linear or square footage wise, and then what is the usage of that space? That kind of determines how we're going to run these calculations. Many times we're actually referencing things like the IBC standardized calculations, which I'll be referencing today. We'll be maybe referencing certain things for local fire codes. The localization might have some different sort of slant rules, but IBC is sort of the base standard that we're going to be using. And before doing any kind of publishing of our design, of our life safety information and making sure we've got proper counts and accounting for proper areas and egress, corridor widths and things like that, exit points, we need to make sure that we run these occupancy code calculations. And all of this by default needs to be done typically very manually. There's not really a good automatic way to do this and practice building information modeling. There's some sort of side slant ways I can do this, but it's not really built in. If I do this as an architect and I just do a calculated value in the schedule, my MEP engineers don't get to understand the calculations and uses that I put in there, and they have to redo all that work that I've just done. Granted, they should be validating anyway, but I should have some ability to communicate my real data. Schedules don't do that unless the data is actually in the real object. So typically it's a manual calculation. Typically I type in a number. So I can also show it on room tags, which means I have to have a parameter on the room, and I can't calculate it automatically in Revit Core. So how do I do this manually? Well, what I'll typically do is I'll create or load a pre-created schedule of rooms or spaces. I typically will organize that schedule by building level, and I typically sort and do some extra stuff with that just so I can see it cleanly, and I choose the fields that I want so that I can see the properties I care about, things like the number, the name, probably the area, and probably the usage. And then I'm going to be validating what that room usage is and coordinate that with the IBC factors. So very specifically, if I was to kind of go over to the web page here and take a look, I'm in the cumulative occupant loads area. I'll probably use this table 1004.1.2 and go through and look at the different usages of space and figure out how I'm going to actually run those calculations based on what the values are. And this is all load factors in square feet. For those of you international, this IBC is in imperial measurements, so 300 square foot gross for different things, or whatever, 15 square foot, 30 square foot, based on the area of the room. So I'm going to be using that in my calculations. And then for each room, after I figure out what the load factors are, I'm going to take and run some basic maths. Area divided by the factor that comes out of the IBC table, and then I'm going to be typing that value in. And anytime my design changes, when there's an edit to the building, I have to go back through and validate those. That has to be done manually because there's no automatic way in Revit for that to be calculated by default. So the nice thing is that in the schedule, I can do some things like totaling by floor or by smoke compartment. So I can take that value that I've entered if it's a real numerical value, and I can do some totaling for that, which is kind of cool. And then I'm going to take those values manually, copy those numbers out, or run some calculations and type those numbers someplace else so I can run calculations for other things like plumbing fixture calcs or egress calcs or outdoor airflow calcs. Those are manual copies, pastes, because there's not a lot of good ways to get that to automatically populate something else because it's not a real calculated value in my rooms and I can't run calculations. So that's all manual stuff, and that takes time. On small projects, maybe it takes an hour or two. On big projects, maybe it takes a day, right? There's a lot of time, and the more projects I have going and the more projects I have in phases where this kind of calculation happens, that diverts my attention more towards this, and I have to validate that. Typically what I'll do is have a person who's sort of really good at this, and that's their job, right? They'll do that. So if we're going to be taking a look at this, like what is the cost for something like this? The whole reason we're talking about this in this particular series is we're tying it back to the return on investment calculator, the ROI calculator on the site. So let's take a look at that real quick, and then we're going to come back and actually show how this can be more efficient inside of Revit. So I'm going to go to the website, to the ctcsoftware.com. I'm going to the resources. We've been here a few times in this series, going to the ROI calculator right here. And I'm using a building workflow. This is architecture, MEP, structural construction. And we're focusing today on architecture MEP for this rooms and spaces kind of example. In the tasks over here, I'm talking about room. You can substitute space, occupancy for building code validation, whatever that code might be. And so when I choose this, it gives me some default properties, right? And you can adjust these properties. The default here is about 2 hours. It takes about 2 hours, so 120 minutes. Maybe you want to put this in hours and you're like, yeah, it takes two hours, right? And maybe I have to do this once a week for my projects. And maybe only one person ever really does this. Maybe it's more than once a week. Maybe I'm having 2 of these a week. Whatever that is, that frequency is for you. Maybe you're talking about per month and I do this 4 times a month, right? Whatever that frequency is for you, you can put those numbers in here. And then how many people in your firm end up doing this task? If I have 2 people or if I have 3 people doing this, you can see immediately what that cost change is for how much this costs, either in direct costs or in opportunity costs, where my 92 or 100 hours spent doing this may be better invested some other way, right? So then you can also adjust as far as what that dollar-based cost is. You can adjust what the billable rate is. Now, you might want to talk about like, what is my true cost, my 100%, like what do I see on the books cost? And that might just be the hourly rates that I pay people. Maybe I'm talking about $28 an hour or $30 an hour, whatever your hourly rates are for the people doing this particular task. So that's a true cost, like 100%. I can see this is how much it cost me, but there's opportunity involved in that because while they're doing this, they may be billing that to the project and they're maybe not doing design, but they're just doing menial calculations, right? If you're billing out on your projects at $150 an hour, or potentially maybe you're using a higher level person with more experience and it's $200 an hour, you can see what that cost is to the projects themselves, and it's not spent on design, right? So that time, that money is not being spent towards the design, it's being spent towards calculations. So if we're doing this, if we had an automated tool that could do this way faster, we're going to say just on average 5 minutes, because on super big projects, it's about 5 minutes. On smaller projects, it's actually more like a minute. But you can take these numbers and you can manipulate those as well and see how much time could you save or recoup if you were to automate this particular code calculation, and how much cost savings might there be involved with that. So if I could save 92 hours of my time and dedicate that back to projects, and if I could save $18,000 and have that be back in design budget instead of calculation budget, that's meaningful numbers, right? And for a suite that costs a very low dollar amount, we're talking $400 for a suite like this. It's not that expensive, but you can save all of this time. That means that you're able to, use that time more wisely for other things. That's great. That's an important thing, right? So you can dabble with these numbers, see what this means to you, but the two tools we're talking about today is Spreadsheet Link and Schedule Excel. Both tools together are going to achieve the overall workflow for my room occupancy calcs and documenting in my project set the building code validation. So I'm going to be actually bringing some graphic schedules back in that Revit typically can't do. We're going to do both of those today. We're going to do it in about a minute or two, because we're now going to jump over and take a look at this automated workflow live. So first I'm going to show you the workflow, how it can work if you get it all set up the way you want it, how it could potentially work for you. And then I'm going to show you how to set this up. How could you build this workflow? So in Revit, I have a floor plan here. I've actually got an entire building model. There's rooms on every floor in this building. I'm going to be focusing just on level 1 just for this particular example, but it's going to do the calculation building wide when I run this. I'm going to just load and run my settings. We are going to see those settings show up inside of a folder here. I'm going to have it automatically dump into my little local folder here on my C drive, and it's going to sit right next to my settings, just automatically, so it makes it easy and I'm not navigating all over the place. You could have this go anywhere you want it technically. We're going to see that show up right here. We're going to go take a look at it. So first off, I'm going to go to Spreadsheet Link Express. This is what an end user would do. This is the automated workflow. I'm going to go ahead and load up some settings here. This is my room occupancy and plumbing code calculation settings. And what this is going to do is rip through my project, and it's going to re-pull a license here real quick. There we go. It's going to pull a license. It's going to get everything, and you're going to see these numbers out here all adjust. It's going to be going through and making changes to each of my individual rooms. Like my training room 1 out here originally was 0 people per the room. Occupancy value here, little parameter that I have, was 0, and now it's populated as 26. It has 26 people in there, and that's because it simply did some basic maths. Area divided by area per person. Because this room is an educational classroom, it's 20 square foot per person, and so it does the maths and rounds down to the nearest whole person. That's what it's basically going to do. So in this case, it went through and did this for every room across my project. It also, at the same time, because of how this particular building is configured, floor by floor, it figured out how many women's toilets I needed, how many men's toilets, how many men's urinals, how many labs total I needed, how many drinking fountains I needed on this floor to serve this group of people. So it did all that. You say, but Sean, I don't see that part. Well, that's because that's what actually got dumped out here into my folder. Right here is a spreadsheet that has all of the calculations that it just ran. Here's my room data, and it ran some formula on that to take the numbers and do the maths and give me a total number of people, or nothing if it's not occupiable space. And then it went through, and for the water closet calcs inside of here, there's actually 3 different kinds of water closet calcs depending on which kind of agency I'm beholden to, and it determines kind of what that load is. Level 2 apparently has a ton of people. It did my urinal calcs, it did my lav calcs, a couple of different methods of lav calculations, a couple of different methods of drinking fountain calculations out here, and all of these tables can be brought back in, depending on what I'm doing, and placed on sheets. I haven't done that step yet. Let's finish this up and actually bring those back into my project. I'm going to use Schedule Excel. This is the second part of the workflow. I'm going to use Schedule Excel to actually bring into my project. Let's get rid of this one because I don't want this. Remove that guy. And let's bring in the new one. So I'm going to add some references to outside spreadsheets. Open that up. Let's go grab the one that I just dumped out. I'm going to specifically pick the ones that I need. Maybe I want water closet method 3, urinal method 1, lav method 3, drinking fountain method 1. Like I can pick and choose whichever one is appropriate for the region that I'm working in. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK here. And it's going to be bringing those particular views into my project using all of my typical visibility settings. It's going to have them linked into my project. I must have chosen levels as well accidentally. I don't really need levels, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that one since I don't want it. I just want the drinking fountain calculations, labs, urinals, and water closets here. And once I have those in my project, I'm going to go ahead and drop them onto a sheet. So they're actually sitting right here. I'm going to go ahead and go to a sheet, and maybe I just use, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. I'll just grab my details sheet here. It's irrelevant what sheet I place it on, but we're going to go ahead and take my water closet calc and throw that out here someplace. We'll take urinal calcs and throw it right next to it. We'll take lav calcs, put it next to that, and drinking fountain calcs and put that over here at the end. That one looks a little tiny. That's all right. It's all good. But it's got those imported here into my project model. So nice and easy, right? That was quick. That was painless, and it's got the formatting similar to what I had inside of Excel. Actually, I may have not set my settings correct for the actual formatting. It looks like it's doing auto fit, but that's fine. It's got my data imported. That took all of a few seconds. Now, I'm fully aware that my method of calculation is 100% using net calculations, and there's a lot of them that are using gross calculations. You can go either way. It depends on what you need to do. You set up your calculations the way that you want them. But in my case, my rooms are all going to the inside faces of the walls and doing some base calculations there. That's how I've chosen to do it. You could use areas if you really wanted to. You could use spaces. There's a lot of different ways of doing this. I'm choosing one way just to show you how this works with a very simple object that I'm going to be placing anyway. But it takes very little time here to actually go through once I have the right data and get this to work. I might update these real quick because the formatting is not really exactly what I'm looking for. Let's just double check here. Let's go and update these. Nope, that's not what I meant to do. I may have to do this one by one because I didn't do it in the first place. There's some graphics options that you can set up inside of here. Yeah, it was set to auto fit for all of them. And I should have told it to just preserve the actual the sizes. So if I really wanted to redo this, in fact, I'll just do this real quick in front of you. Remove this, re-add them. I'm going to make sure that my graphics options are set up correctly to preserve the options. I should have done that in the first place. No other overrides here, just going to use whatever's specified. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK and just reload that one more time. Doesn't take very long. So multiple worksheets, calculation 3, 1, 3, 1. Don't give me levels because I don't want it, and go. So you can see it actually building those schedules. And now that I have those, I'm going to go ahead and just bring them in here again. Yeah, that looks way better. Way better. Urinal calcs. Yep, they're stacking up a bit better here. I think my cell heights inside of Excel might be just a titch off. And that's why it's kind of staggering the bottom. But at least the formatting is way closer here. But yeah, I think I have my cell heights unmatched just a little bit from Excel. But it's going to go ahead and bring those in. Looks just like it was in the Excel space. I could print that out. Part of my sheet, no big deal. So how do you set this up yourself? What are your next steps to actually do this? I'm going to go ahead and build this somewhat from scratch and show you how I put this together. So I already had a spreadsheet that has these sort of schedules configured on them. And when I first started this process and I opened up Spreadsheet Link, the very first thing that I did when I was configuring this workflow is I opened that spreadsheet. I used it as a template because that spreadsheet, if I grab this P fixture loads right here and I open this up, this one happens to already have rooms in here because I've done this workflow before, but this tab here just existed. It exists as a tab, and I used to go in here and type in a number for these occupancies level by level by level after I did the calculations as I wanted to in Revit. I would type a value in. Now what I've done is I've linked this back using a sum if, and I looked up data off of my rooms tab. So when my rooms tab gets all filled out over here, and we're going to build up this rooms tab in a minute, but when this rooms tab gets all filled out, all of these other tabs inside of here know to look data up off of that rooms tab. Okay, they know that. You'll notice inside of here as well that I have a levels tab. It's actually filled out with some data. I shouldn't have had that inside of here. It should have been empty, but I forgot to declare it out. So these here, if I was to delete these, not the do a delete, I can't delete it because I haven't unlocked it yet. Let's unlock this. Data unprotected. The password, by the way, is all super secret. It's all lowercase password. I'm going to take this and I'm going to go ahead and take those rows and delete them. Normally, I would have no data inside these cells, just having a default template sitting here. And these will fill out as well. And I do that because over here again on these tabs, I'm actually looking up the names of the levels from data that's on that sheet over here. Because I deleted them, these don't know what to do. They're just like, oh yeah, look up a specific value from a specific row. Look up the first row or second row or third row in that data set, and there's nothing there, so it's showing zeros. And that's okay, because when my project populates it, it's going to automatically fill itself out, and we'll actually see that happen because it's indexing the level names, and it's using the level names to figure out which rooms it's supposed to pull. So it knows all that stuff. It's doing this for me. It's doing it on my behalf. So these tabs, you configure these and make them look as pretty as you want them to. This is just what Schedule Excel is going to be bringing back in. In Spreadsheet Link, the real key to this workflow is the data that you pull and the calculations that you run. So I'm going to show you this from the point of view of rooms. And I will also show you how you can do this with any other category that you want for any calculations that you run on a regular basis. If you can pull the data to Excel, you can do whatever you want. Now, there's other workflows we're going to talk about with Schedule Excel in other ways, or Spreadsheet Link rather, in other ways. And we actually have a ton of videos on our YouTube channel already on how to use Spreadsheet Link in some really advanced ways. Today, we're focusing on room calculations. I'm doing rooms in particular. So here in the list of properties, notice how I have areas. So I can absolutely use areas and all of their parameters if I want, and I can get all their data values. I could use doors, I could use walls, I could use whatever. If I scroll down a little way here, there's spaces, right? I think spaces, where is it at? SP, it's in the P, SPs. Now right there's spaces. So if you're MEP, leverage the spaces, that's totally fine. In our case today, I'm gonna be using rooms. This is what I want to be using. So I'm gonna use rooms. In fact, I should have done something here. I should have removed the data calculations that I did because it's going to look like there's some information already here. So we'll actually kind of clear it out and do this in a different way in just a moment here. But I'm going to go ahead and overwrite the rooms tab that's already here. We're going to see this get replaced, and that's okay because all I'm going to simply do is write some settings that place level, area per person, and occupancy back in here in the proper order in the right columns. So we'll be using those fields. And these two, by the way, area per person, CTC, that's my custom parameter. I made that shared parameter in my project. I also have occupancy CTC as a parameter that I made in the project. And I did this because I wanted this same exact occupancy value to show up in a room tag. So my room tags, or if you're using areas, area tags, or space tags, or you name it, as long as it's a shared parameter, the tag and the schedule can show the same data, and the room object or area object can hold the same data. It's all just basic parameters in Revit, really, in that case. But I'm going to go ahead and overwrite this rooms tab, and it's going to give me a list of all of the rooms coming out of my project. Now, it's up to me to make sure that I choose the correct fields in the correct order. Now, the end user, they won't have to make any of these choices. They won't, because we're going to save these settings so that it knows to do all of these things in the proper sequence automatically. It's going to know to open the correct spreadsheet. It's going to know to pull the correct parameters. It's going to know to do the right calculations, because you're going to pre-code all of this. This is the due diligence that as managers you're going to do, and you're going to save that so you don't have to remember these steps every single time. So let's see, what were those values I had again? I think it was level that I had. I had level inside of here. I had the area of the object. So I'm going to grab the area parameter here. I can see the value there. I had area per person CTC. This is the parameter that I made. Looks like there was a couple of other area per persons that were made in my project. I branded mine for me because I don't like playing parameter roulette. So I did this on purpose. It's actually something I typically preach against, but I did it so I could make it real quick in demos because my data set got muddy. And then I needed the occupancy. I want the occupancy CTC, and I very intentionally chose my parameter because the built-in Revit occupancy is text. And that means I can't run maths on it in Revit. I couldn't figure out the total occupancy per floor in Revit with maths because it's text, and you can't run maths on text in Revit. So I chose to make my own, which is a number parameter, and I can run maths on that. And I actually chose a number parameter instead of an integer parameter because some of you like to have decimal people in spaces. And then you run totals on a floor and you do rounding at the floor level, or you do rounding at the smoke compartment level, and that's fine. So I chose to make mine a number in case I want to go either way. I'm rounding to the nearest whole person, but I'm including that number in here anyway. And this is part of where I was mentioning, like, we're seeing data show up here because this parameter already has valid data in it now. Since I had just run that full workflow, it's pulling the data from that parameter in. What I'm going to do is quickly clear this data value out so it looks like I didn't do that. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about how we can run easy formulas inside of here and run some calculations. So in Excel, you have the power to do basic maths, right? Equals 1 plus 1. Ooh, magical, Sean. That's great, right? Like, yes, I can do basic maths here, but you can also do basic cell references. And Spreadsheet Link has nearly all of the power of Excel. If I need more power, well, I can save this spreadsheet out to Excel and get all the cool heads-up displays and access to all the functions and run more calculations, and then import that data later on if I need to. But for now, I'm just going to write it right here because this is a fairly simple formula, at least simple in my opinion. So I'm going to say basically equals this cell divided by this cell. Except for Excel doesn't know how to do that. Why not? Because Excel and spreadsheets don't generally understand what square foot is. That's a value it doesn't get. So now my formula has to get more complicated because I have to trim units of measure off. Think about it this way as well. If you were going to grab, say, the length of something, oops, hang on. If I was going to grab the length of something, you'd have to figure out how to parse feet and inches and fractions of inches before you could do maths on it. In Excel, that formula is like 1.5 miles long. It's not easy. And so instead of doing that, we've baked in for you the ability to strip units from these components. So I could hide the unit symbol. And what that does is it shows you the raw numerical value as Revit has it stored, and it tells you the units of measure here at the top. So square feet, feet and inches, that's the pound, foot, pound, inch sign. So that's what that is. I'm going to get rid of perimeter because I don't need it. But now I don't have to do decimal or fractional, maths inside of here. It gives me decimal feet, and I can use that much more effectively if you need to do lengths of things, like lengths of booths to figure out seated space because your occupancy 18 inches for every linear, piece of fixed seating, right? Like you could do those kinds of calculations if you needed to in a restaurant style space. In my case, I'm keeping it simple for today's discussion, and I want to run some basic maths here. So, it also gave me back values because I changed my formatting here. So another thing that you can do is you maybe saw me do some magic over here where I said equals quote, quote, and it automatically auto-populated down. It auto-filled for me. It did that because I have a checkbox here that says calculated. If I check this box, what Spreadsheet Link will do is take the formula in the topmost row and automatically autofill it all the way down for every instance of every room, and then it stops at the very end. So it stops right here. There's a formula there, and if I change the formula in the topmost row, it will always auto-populate down. And that saves me a ton of time because generally speaking, my calculations are consistent for every single row, right? So now I can do equals this divided by this, and it runs that math down and does the calculation all the way to the bottom and then stops right there, right? So it does the calculation to here. Now you do have to do a little bit of error trapping because you can't do 176 divided by nothing. Excel throws pound value. It doesn't know what to do with that. So what I have to do is I'm going to put in here a little catch clause, if error, do the maths that I want to do, and if there's an error, don't put anything, just put nothing there. And so it'll solve out those problems where there was actually an error in the calculation, and now it puts nothing. So that's great. That saves me a little bit of time. I also don't like the fact that I have decimal peoples inside of here. This is silly to me, so I personally like to round down to the nearest whole person. You may want to be rounding up to the nearest whole person if it's less than one, because it's at least going to have one person in an occupiable space. So I'm going to do that and count that as one, and the rest of these I'm going to round down to the nearest whole person. Actually, I'm just going to cheat and do round up everywhere, just because it's going to be easier for our example here. Round up, do the maths, round up to 0 decimal places. Did I type it wrong? Round up. Oh, I did. I didn't put a comma. Round up to 0 decimal places. There we go. So it's going to run the calculation for me and do the math. Now I could take this and very quickly apply this right back to my project, and now it's just updated all the rooms in my project that were supposed to be updated. I'm done. That was easy, right? So you may have to round up to the nearest whole person. You may, in some cases, you may be able to round down. It's all up to you, right? It's your math. It's your formula. You can do whatever you want to do with your calculations. It's up to you. Anywho, now that I have these numbers, because I have other tabs in here and because these other tabs already know what to do, they're already trying to do some lookup, except for I didn't bring my levels in. So it doesn't know which level to actually match up for the rooms to sum if the value of the rooms if it's on a particular level. It's actually looking to the value here. So I have to go get the levels here as well. I didn't do that. So if I want to do this by level, I'm going to grab the levels. It's actually going to replace my levels tab. I forgot to look exactly what my field formatting was, but I'm pretty sure I know what it was. I believe it was the name of the level. No, levels. Name of the levels. I believe it was the building story. I think I was filtering for just building stories. Filters. Filter by building story equaling true. Yeah, that removed things that weren't actually a part of my occupiable building stories. I believe I had the elevation in here, and I'm pretty sure I had hidden the unit symbols so that I could sort by the building elevation. And that way it goes from lowest to highest. So I have basement level, level 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the roof level. So it's got those levels inside of here. And let's just see if I did that right. Yep, I did. So because of me having the correct fields in the correct order, this knows to go look up the levels, and it pulls the very first level, the second level, third level that's in my building, and it excludes the roof level in my case. And then it also already knows how to go sum if. It knows to take the values here and go sum if the values are all matching up, right? So I did a whole webinar on really powerful Excel formulas and functions that you can use, and I talk about sum if and sum ifs, and there's all kinds of them that you can use. So I was using that. So it's actually taking now the occupancy value over here, and it's looking at the level over here, and it's summing if the level matches a particular property, it sums this value to the total. And so I'm getting now whatever my total occupiable, occupancy is level by level in a particular building. And then I already had built up in my spreadsheet math that basically said, take that occupancy, divide it by 2, round up to the nearest whole person, and then divide that by whatever my load factor is for what kind of water closets I need. And every one of my tabs knows how to do this already because I already wrote these to be able to do the sum ifs in different ways and then divide the people up in different ways and then do the calculations for how many water closets or labs or whatever I needed in different ways. So it's doing this already in my building. And then, I've got urinal calcs, which of course the women's rooms won't have urinal calcs, and I cut off the first part over here because I didn't need it. I'm going to be pasting this table right next to this table when I get this into Revit. So I'm just going to be bringing in individual tabs, and so I'm building myself sort of puzzle pieces, a kit of parts that I can throw together and have it do everything it's supposed to be doing. So I just did that a few different times, and it's looking up at the right data. So I've now built myself a master spreadsheet that can do all of the things. For my end users to be able to make this repeatable, I have to give them a template that knows about rooms, that knows how to look up off of rooms, and knows how to look up off of, I can't squish this down, knows how to look up off of levels as well, so it knows what the order of my levels are. And I have to make it so my users don't have to pick and filter rooms and levels and give all the properties here. I want to just make it so that it's real easy for them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build a quick template for this. I'm going to go and unlock this spreadsheet here. I'm going to do the same thing that I had done before, which is delete all the data here. So row delete, just delete some cells so it looks nice and clean when a user comes in here. Go to my rooms over here, do the same thing, data, unprotect this worksheet, grab all of my rooms. I'm just simply building myself a saved template that I can use. So we're going to go to row, delete all this stuff, delete, 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 all the things, right? We're good to go there. And I'm going to save this spreadsheet out as a thing. So I'm going to call this webinar, and we'll use today's date, 2024-01-31, right? So I'm going to be saving this particular XLSX template file. I'm calling it a template. It's a starting point. Save that. I don't need to open it. And now I'm going to save my settings here using what's called an advanced save. I'm not just going to save my settings. The settings, if I just save them, it just saves what I have in this window. If I do an advanced save, I actually get the extra cool benefit of being able to specify a pre-existing template worksheet, which is today's webinar template that I already had, that we kind of basically built it together. I'm going to be specifying that, and it's going to save the settings that are in this window. So it knows all about my filters, it knows all about the categories, it knows everything it's supposed to be doing, and I'm going to go ahead and save this someplace. We'll call this out as Spreadsheet Link Express ready for webinar 2024-01-31, and I'm going to save that. So I'm going to save my settings out. So when I save this now, if I close this out, just shut this down. At this point, let's get rid of this out of here for right now. If I take this, I probably should have cleaned out all my rooms here as well, but if I go Spreadsheet Link, I'm going to do this interactively, Spreadsheet Link, and I do load settings from file. Remember what I said? The very first thing it's going to do is open that spreadsheet. Open, it does that first. And then it starts to grab my rooms category and replaces my rooms tab with data that comes out of my project and runs the exact same calculation. And then it replaces my levels tab. And it does the exact sorting and filtering and organizing that I told it to do from before. So all of my tabs now replace themselves with all of the right data. That took me to do this step here after I worked out the workflow. It's all of 10 seconds, right? It's really easy. So you run the calculations, you do exactly what you need to do in Excel based on Revit data, save those settings, save your workflow, and your end users just benefit from this because now they can just blindly run your settings that you've already vetted and save a ton of manual calculation. Again, you can use whatever category you want. Rooms, areas, spaces, use levels, use furniture of certain kinds with certain properties on them. You build up your workflow how you want. You do that once. You spend the time one time to build a repeatable workflow. And once that's done, every time you need to run this, it's very consistent. Every single time you get a proper result based on pre-built stuff. It's such a time saver and such a quality of life saver. So, and in my case, I actually had it set up so I could just run the whole thing blindly so the user doesn't have to ask any questions and run any manual applications. If I run that here, spreadsheet link express. I could go ahead and load my settings file up, and my settings file actually even tells it how and where to save the actual resulting spreadsheet, so I can turn around and use the schedule Excel environment to link it right back into my project for those external formatted spreadsheets that I want to bring in graphically. So this automatically saves my settings as well. That advanced save actually lets me do that. This is going to rerun. This is going to change from 27 to 26 because I'm rounding down. This is going to change to 25. Give it a second. 26 and 25, I believe, and it updates the elements it's supposed to update. So 26, yep, 25, yep, done. So it's going to do all of that work for me based on how I wrote my formulas. Again, you can write your formulas however it is you want to write your formulas. All right. One question that I did see pop up, and in fact, before I jump into questions, I'm going to jump over and just say, for those of you who aren't going to hang out for the QA session, I'm going to say thank you. We always appreciate when you show up live. Those of you watching this on YouTube, again, thank you as well. We hope that, again, you subscribe to the channel and get information like this more in the future.